It's the 5th of June 2022. Warm welcome to see you all, and on this rather wet day. Now, one of the things June said to me is I had to mention Pentecost. So welcome to Cafe Church. Cafe Church is a concept that some people are still fairly unfamiliar with. The rules about Cafe Church are there are no rules. Do welcome, come on in, help yourself to tea, coffee, cake. And there are no rules in Cafe Church because it's very much an informal affair. It's a chance for you to chat, you can heckle, you can get involved, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. There's a few people who won't be invited to heckle because they'll do it anyway. But people to mark me. But anyway, really good to see you, and we will be having a number of Bible passages as we go through the concept. And back in 2017, I led a Cafe Church on time and stress. And then in 2018, which I think was the last Cafe Church we had, I think just before June came, I led a Cafe Church in here, many of you will remember it, on homelessness. In those days, I was a trustee of a homeless charity. I did my 10 years, and you'll hear about a couple of charities that I'm a trustee for today as part of the theme of the service. So the theme of today's service, if we want to call it a service, is the whole concept of celebration and jubilee. And we're going to talk a little bit about what they mean. But my hope is by the end of the time together this morning, you will have had thought about both celebration and jubilee in a slightly different way than you did when you first came in here this morning. And I hope that will give you some food for thought for yourself and for all of us as we go forward and go out of here today. So, I'm not going to say much more, I don't think, other than to welcome David. David, you're welcome to come in and do your reading. And David is going to read about King David. What I want you to really hear is about how King David celebrated. And he celebrated in a way that most of us are far too inhibited to do so. And that is, again, one of the concepts of celebration that I think is really important. I always think of a 2-year-old. When a 2-year-old wants to negotiate something, if she's not or he's not happy about, they will put everything into it, won't they, Jess? If they want something or they don't want to do something, won't they? They are the best negotiators because they put every bit of their body. And I think the concept of what David did, you'll hear in just a second, he celebrated wholeheartedly. So over to you, David.
Thank you. If you like to follow the reading, it's the second book of Samuel, chapter 6, and I shall be reading verses 12 to verse 15. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went down and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. David, wearing a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might, while he and the entire house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets.
Thank you, David. So, I'm not sure if you've had any celebrations this week. Our village is having their celebration this afternoon, and it was due to be outside. And in fact, the only thing today is good for is filling up my water butts. And I don't think a lot of people will be having much celebration outside today. But I hope you've had some celebration in your villages or in your street, either had or going to have. And I think it's just interesting to see, in a week where we're celebrating 70 years on the throne, just the whole wider ideas of celebration. So let's start by singing a song about celebration, shall we? Mark loves quizzes. So it's not a quiz, no paper, no pencils, and there's no prizes, so bad luck. But what we are going to do is just go through the origins of Jubilee, and if some of you feel a little bit out of touch with this, don't worry. Somebody else will know. So who knows the origins of the concept of Jubilee? Where did it come from? The Bible. The Bible. Great. Okay, so question number 2 is which book in the Old Testament? Not quite. Leviticus. Yes, yes. And I'm now going to spend the next hour reading Leviticus. I'm afraid that was an in-joke for Christians. Because you need to know your Bible to know it's a little bit boring in places. But anyway, not to worry. It does go on. When I was younger, I read the Bible from cover to cover a couple of times, and it's probably not the best way of learning and reading the Bible, but it does at least teach you about one or two things. And this, I actually found this bit quite interesting. So how many years was it in between Jubilees?
7.
49.
50.
Both right, yes. So everybody knows the Sabbath being the Sunday. Non-Christians will know that as well. But the Sabbath was also every 7 years. And 7 times 7 gave you the Jubilee. And on the 50th year, you had a great big celebration. So, does anybody know what happened on the Jubilee year, the 50th year?
Debts were cancelled.
Debts were cancelled, yeah.
Slaves were free.
Slaves were free, yeah. Land returned to the original owners. And it was very much a rebalancing of the Jewish world. And if the Jews were not allowed to sell themselves into slavery, but they were allowed to go and work entirely for people because they got into debt. But at the 49th, 50th year, they would then be released from that. And likewise land. Land was seen to be owned by God, and therefore you only looked after the land. You didn't have it forevermore, but it went back to the original owners. Either it was given back or at a preferential rate on the 49th year. So it's quite a time of renewal and looking back and reflection and to put everything back right. So Jackie, are you going to come and read out the front? I find that sort of really quite interesting. So the fact that the idea is the land was left fallow, and that was very important. But also it gave people very much a chance to balance and come back to equilibrium in that time. And it's a really important concept, and I think I quite like, later on in the service, we will come back again on our table discussions. So that whole sort of look back, look forward, what do we want to do differently? What do we want to start doing going forward after what has been quite an interesting couple of years? So thank you very much, Jackie. We're going to sing now a couple more songs. My favourite being the second one. It's the favourite song actually of the whole church, based on the 23rd Psalm. But before that, we're going to sing something else, which is also a great song. Indeed, cake bakers. I really appreciate those of you who did a lot of great work, fantastic cakes. Wonderful. It's always good that we can come together over food, and as a church I think we're quite good at that. So I'm now going to sort of unpack the concept of celebration a little bit further, and I'm going to pick 3 quite unusual examples. The first 2 are a little bit, you have to indulge me a little bit, are my charities, and I'll talk about those in a little bit of detail, and then Ardern is going to read, I think actually one of the more challenging parables in the New Testament, and I think there's certainly quite a tough bit at the end, but I'll try to explain that, albeit I'm not doing a sermon. Good. So have we go into the PowerPoint, can we, Steve? So I want to introduce you to a charity which I'm a trustee. I happen to be the chair since last August, which is taking up quite a lot of my retirement. And most of us spent a lot of time trying to get through our working lives and then retire. Some of us have even done it twice. And most people in this church are now happily retired. But I want to introduce you to some people who celebrate going to work. And I really do mean celebrate going to work. And that is Recycling Ollerton and Booton. So the first thing you think, well, it's a recycling charity. And yes, we do a lot of recycling. In fact, we do over 700 tonnes of glass and stuff. But fundamentally, what Rob is about is giving employment to people with learning difficulties. And we have people with autism and at various, all sorts of special needs. But they come to work and they are just so excited. And they also cook for the lunch, and we put them through various training. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit about what Rob is, but why it's such a sort of celebration of work. So, so the idea is we're giving real work. So most of what we do is curbside glass collection. So there's 11 local villages, including our own, but around the Ollerton area, and we're slowly expanding. And we're working amongst the community. So the community see the students go out, and they often talk to us, and we like that, and often they give us money. But in fact, you wouldn't believe it, but these people actually pay us to come to work. The economics of it just wouldn't work elsewhere. We earn about 80 to 100,000 pounds from selling off the glass, selling off the cardboard, selling off the tins, all sorts of horse bedding or whatever else it is we end up by converting stuff into. But it costs about £500,000 to run the charity a year. So all the young people with disabilities in this situation get a grant, and they are encouraged to use the money how they see fit. And they place quite a lot of their money with us. And people may pay us a little as £20 a day if they are pretty fit and able, but just need a bit of guidance, or quite a lot more money if they need a lot more one-to-one help. And a lot of them do need an extremely high degree of help. So that's kind of what we do each year, sort of all the tons, but they get a lot of qualifications, and that's kind of the end of the presentation. So I just want to, you probably didn't think of people celebrating going to work, but my view is these people absolutely celebrate, and the staff are an incredibly engaged bunch. So I commend them to you. And just by way of interest, by way of thinking about the concept of celebration. And of course, those of us who are retired and look back at work, should always remember those people who are doing, collecting glass on the end of our street, and I think they do an absolutely marvellous job. So that's my first unusual part of celebration. I'm now going to show you a video of two young boys, Sam and Alex, and I'm also a trustee for a much bigger charity called Rainbow's Hospice. Pete and Trish have been around, and special young boys, but everybody we have in Rainbows is special, and it is a most uplifting place. Many people would think a hospice, a children's hospice where children die, and we have a special part of the hospice which unfortunately is for when people die, and we even chill beds down. We have a special, and they look like an ordinary room, but actually the whole room comes down. So because a lot of mothers, when they have neonatal, newborn babies dying, can't put the baby down. It's tough. It takes up to a week sometimes with our special staff to help people part from their newly deceased offspring. And yeah, it's tough, but whenever we can, we make it joyous. And fantastic staff. I'm just a very small cog. There's I think 12 trustees, but more than 150 staff, and more than 150 volunteers, and loads of people around the country who are doing things all the time. But the whole aim is to bright and short lives and actually make it a place of joy, a place of celebration, because none of us know how long we are on this earth, but we should certainly live it to the full. And I think what you saw in Sam and Alex is what they do is they live their lives to the full. And I think it's our duty to live lives well. Yeah. So thank you for indulging me to be able to show you that. I hope it was thoughtful. So that was my second example of celebration. And I'm now going to ask Ardern to come and read.
Okay, well if you want to follow it, you'll find it in Matthew chapter 22, verses 1 to 14. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come. But they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted calf have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'"
Outwardly a celebration, a wedding feast, a sort of special occasion. But Jesus was telling this parable at a time when he was under a lot of pressure from the Pharisees. He was being criticised, and I feel I can almost hear that in the, I won't say harshness of the story, but within the context of the story. Because we hear initially that God, or the Father, but it's basically God. It's a parable, so I think you're all aware that a parable is often a way of telling a story or showing an example, but making things come alive to people who probably couldn't take it in a raw form. But occasionally that made it more difficult to interpret. So here we have the Father, which is God, inviting everybody, so inviting chosen guests. And the chosen guests, I think we can be sure, were the Jews. And those chosen guests chose not to come, chose to make excuses, chose to be quite aggressive, even kill some of the people who invited. So the Father then sends the invite out to wider, further afoot. And that's great news for all of us, because none of us, as far as I'm aware, are Jews. So he invited the Gentiles in. So the first part of this story is we're clear that God's invitation is for all of us. Fantastic. That's the first bit of good news. The second bit of good news from this parable, as I see it, is he invited both the good and the bad. There is no quality of how good people are to be invited in. So again, I think that's pretty good news in reading this passage. But then I think the reason that it's probably not preached on, and if somebody wants to explain it to me more after, I'll be delighted. But I've spent a little bit of time looking at this passage over the last week. And what I think is the the person who didn't have the right clothing in, it's nothing to do with clothing, okay? The clothing is simply a metaphor, okay? It is about how you approached, and are you sincere in coming to the invitation that God gives all of us? And are you authentic when you come along? Or is it just froth and frivolity? And I don't think it is about froth and frivolity. I think it is quite a serious commitment. But the good news is, however many charitable good deeds we do, that won't get us to heaven. However nice a people, however good a people we are, that isn't really that important at the end of the day. Albeit, I believe God gave a lot of us some little talent, and we should use it. I don't believe we should sit on our hands. But that's not what will get us anywhere near heaven, I'm afraid. It is having faith in Jesus Christ. As simple as that. And those people who are true in their faith are the people who are clothed. They are properly clothed to come. So there is nothing special. Please don't read this passage, which is all about a celebration feast, as being the fact that I'm not good enough. Because that is not what it's about. However good you are, it doesn't get you in the door. This is about having faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, being true, authentic, and sincere in your faith. And then you are washed. It's a bit of a overused expression by Christians, and a lot of people find it quite difficult, washed in the blood of Jesus Christ. But what that means is you are true to him as the best you can. It doesn't mean that you will never sin again. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means that you're doing your absolute most to be sincere and authentic to Jesus Christ. And I think that's what the passage is about. But we have many more learned people in this room, Ardern being one, Robin being another, who are ex-ministers who can probably put more light onto that wonderful passage. But I just use it as a quite challenging, but actually quite reassuring passage to the whole concept of celebration. And we should celebrate because we are invited. We should celebrate because it doesn't matter how good or bad we are. So that's my little read on it. I say, I won't do a sermon, but that's as near to me as you'll get from me as a sermon. And so you've now had 3 examples of what has been celebration, but probably not the sorts of celebration you may have thought about when you first came in this morning. And you've understood quite a lot about Jubilee. And I am hoping that gives you some context. We're now going to have a bit of a table discussion. And you can talk about the cake if you like, it's entirely up to you. But what I would like you to do is just to cast your mind back of how you've been stirred up this morning. So what sort of things are taking shape in your mind? And cast your mind back, going back to the Jubilee, reflection, looking forward. Reflect on the last couple of years. And I think there's been some fantastic things that have gone on the last couple of years, in amongst all the gloom, and we can all talk about all the negative stuff. So let's just not talk about that, but we're on celebration today. But many people now are shopping more locally. Many people are doing a lot more in their local community. I hope these few days together for the Queen's Jubilee, people will get to know their neighbours. I heard people talking on the radio yesterday that they've got to know their neighbours for the first time. And I think COVID kind of helped that in a sort of way, not initially, but over time, a lot of people were incredibly kind to a lot of other people. I think people have appreciated the environment more, they've walked more. So many positive things. People are supporting local companies, local industries, more than they did before. So I think there's many a positive thing. So what I want you to just talk about, if you wouldn't mind, is what will you stop? What will you start? And what will you continue doing as an individual, and as a group, a family, a church, try not to make it what the government should start doing, because we can all do that, and we all know they should stop quite a few things, but we won't go down that one today. What we want to do is make it personal. Okay, what has been on your mind to celebrate, looking forward, to stop, start, and continue over your coming days ahead? Because I do hope that these big times of change, and it's been a pretty tumultuous last few years with, they mentioned Brexit, COVID, and everything that has gone on, and the terrible situation in Ukraine. That has made people reflect about how much things do matter, and some things that they possibly thought mattered a lot in the past really don't matter at all. So yeah, so that is your topic for the next sort of 10-15 minutes. Top yourself up with tea, coffee, cake, but do try to have a chat on what's on your mind to stop, start and continue. And then I'm not going to pick on anybody, but I will ask table stiffs if they want to share, but don't feel any obligation. I'm certainly, the people who I'll pick on, they know I'll pick on them, so it's all they're not visitors, and they're not my wife. You'll be pleased to hear, my dear. So yeah, so yes, enjoy yourselves for the next 15 minutes, but do try to focus on stop, start, and continue. Okay, over to you.
Right, yeah. Sue,
Thanks for coming along this morning. I hope you enjoyed it, reflected on one or two things, and probably seen some different ideas on celebration and Jubilee that you may have thought of at the beginning of this week. So yeah, if you want to talk about anything, please see Jenny or other wise people in this room. And yeah, we would love to see you again if you're a visitor. As Christians, we certainly don't have all the answers. All we know is something where to start looking. Yeah, we're all on a journey together, and certainly none of us are anything like perfect. You ask my wife, she knows. Good. Anyway, so let's say the grace together, shall we? For those of you who know the grace. May the grace
of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Good, thank you very much. Have a great day and a celebration. Hopefully it won't rain all afternoon. Thank you.